Hi, Sophie. Thanks ever so much for joining me today. It's great to see you. And thank you so much for agreeing to talk at our second online National Hypnotherapy Council conference. We're really looking forward to having you there. So it's just a short chat today, really, to find out a bit more about you for those who don't know what your background is and how you've come to specialise in what you do.
Hey, yeah. So ask me any questions.
How did you get into hypnotherapy?
Well, I use hypnobirthing, and would never have gone to a hypnotherapist before I used hypnobirthing. I probably thought of it much like many of the stereotypes, and it was never a therapy that I thought was worth trying until I was pregnant, 15 weeks pregnant, and my mum rang up and she said, "Oh, switch the telly on, Richard and Judy." If anyone can remember Richard and Judy, they said, "Switch the telly on, Richard and Judy are talking about pain-free birth." Now, anyone who knows my work around hypnobirthing knows that I've gone a long way away from that now, and I do a very broad range around birth. But I just switched over and thought, well, pain-free birth, I'll have some of that. And I watched it, and I couldn't find a practitioner because I thought I had to go to a hypnobirthing practitioner. I didn't even think about a hypnotherapist, and read a book and listened to some tracks and had an absolutely completely different birth from my first birth. And it really helped me postnatally as well. And my husband said, "Why don't you go and find out more about it?" So rather than just reading up a bit more on hypnobirthing, I thought, I'm going to train as a hypnotherapist. And I did the course principally because I wanted to be a better hypnobirthing teacher, not because I wanted to be a hypnotherapist. And actually the course just completely blew me away, and I was just opened up to this world that I didn't know existed. So, and that was it. I didn't look back. I was working as a policy advisor in the civil service, and I just had my kids, and it just seemed like a natural transition. And I left my job and all my security and jumped into it and just let it take me where it has, really.
That's amazing. It's funny enough, very similar. I was the same. I went for hypnobirthing for my second pregnancy, and it subsequently trained myself after that. So I completely get where you're coming from. And did you specialise straight away in the hypnobirthing side of things? Or
yeah, I trained. It was really, really important for me not to just do a bit of training around it. If I go into something, I need to go into it properly. So I trained in lots of different approaches to hypnosis for birth. So I went to a course with a hypnotherapist. I did a course with someone in the States. I did other courses as well in the UK. So I did a lot of work building it up, and I did some mindfulness work as well. So I integrated them all together to create my own approach. And and I principally specialized in what I call perinatal hypnosis. So pregnancy, birth, postnatally, and as you know, I've had 2 books published around that now, and the first one just grew by word of mouth. It was amazing, and has sold over 60,000 copies now. Yeah. So, but it's not the only thing I did. I did have a general practice, but mostly my work was around a lot of work around hormones and understanding the impact of hormones on our body during these transitional stages.
And presumably that's what's then led you into what you're now doing more of.
So menopause wasn't something I intended to do. And then I remember it must be my late 30s. And I noticed that in my clinic, a lot of the women that were coming in all had similar issues. So it was principally around sleep, anxiety, weight gain. And the other thing which was consistent, which was a real surprise, was the sudden emergence of very old traumas or phobias, just sudden onset phobias. And there is some evidence to show this happens in women that are perimenopausal. And so I was in my late 30s and menopause seemed miles away, but the penny started to drop. And a lot of these women were in their 50s, and were having mobility issues because they put on all this weight, but also joint issues because of menopause, hot flushes, things like that, but hadn't thought that hypnosis could help them. And I remember thinking one day, I wish hypnosis was destigmatized and that women would come and see me in their early 40s so they could change habits and behaviors around nutrition, around exercise, because exercise changes, your body changes, so you have to adapt to that in menopause. And so I thought, gosh, you could establish these habits really early on, and rather than sort of 10 years later feel like you're firefighting. But also hormones start to shift in kind of mid 40s, maybe even earlier. And at first it may be a bit of low mood. And it's like, is it me or is it the kids, or you're shouting more at the kids? And people don't realize that's actually maybe the start of perimenopause. And you can use hypnosis for that, but also establishing these habits and behaviors really early on. And so that's what I started to do. And I talk about menopause planning in my book, because we talk about birth plans, things like that, but we don't menopause plan. It sounds like quite an alien concept, but actually you can educate yourself really well in your 40s so that you know what you want, you know what your values are around it, you know what's important. But also it's not just about medication. It's also, for me, that those transitional phases, they're like a rite of passage. So they are up and down, they're tricky phases, but you learn about yourself, you can go deeper into yourself. And this is, where I suppose archetypes like the wise woman emerge, but they take a bit of work. And so yeah, it seemed like a natural progression to move into menopause. So then I just learned a lot about menopause. I'm perimenopausal myself. And there's just a brilliant community of women out there who are doing this work. And it does influence your practice and, who you're working with. So if someone comes in with insomnia, whether you're a menopause specialist or not, if someone the age of kind of in their early 40s upwards has sudden onset insomnia and can't sleep, or is being woken up in the night and can't get back to sleep, typical approaches to insomnia might not work. So you might have to think about why that's happening and understand the physiology around menopause and the hormones in order to maybe go in a different way. Go in the normal way, you just kind of go in a different way to get the same result.
Yeah, I completely get it. I think when in my practice, I definitely saw the same thing you're talking about. There was women of a certain age who were coming in who, were suffering with anxieties and phobias, particularly driving anxiety. I used to see a lot of people with that, that sort of loss of self-confidence. But again, because I wasn't of an age where it was necessarily on my mind, now it would definitely ring bells with me. But at the time, I would never have sat there and thought, I wonder if, this could be being affected by hormones or perimenopause. But it's only when you go through it, I think yourself, sometimes there's a lot more conversation happening, I think, generally now. So people are more aware, but I still think it's really useful to have a conversation in this space in terms of hypnotherapy practice, help other therapists and practitioners be more aware of that being a possibility when that sort of demographic walks through their door. So what sort of thing, are you going to be talking about at the conference to other therapists?
Yeah, I'm going to ask people to look out for certain things. So if you've got people coming in 40s who've got weight gain, sudden onset anxiety and insomnia, that typical approaches might not work in the way that you expect them to. So weight loss is trickier. It is trickier. There's just no way around that. And approaches like strength work, for example, rather than lots of cardio exercise can be better, because cardio increases cortisol, which can be tricky for women in menopause. So there are slightly different approaches to that. Then insomnia, it's understanding that often people are waking at night because of cortisol spikes or hot flushes, which are vasomotor symptoms, and that can be triggered they can be exacerbated through anxiety, low level anxiety and things like that. So sometimes tackling insomnia with anxiety, looking at anxiety first and foremost, can have better results. Also trying to really communicate to your clients that you can help with hot flushes and things like that. You know, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the imagery work around this that is so successful. And so I'll give people some pointers around the physiology, around the key things you'll see in menopause, how to work with some of those things. I mean, I use a lot of colour and imagery work with women, and it's just brilliant because I find that women tend to be more creative during menopause. There is a part of the brain, and the creative part of the brain, that tends to be more active during menopause. There have been some studies around that. And so working with imagery and colour can be a really great way to get results as well. So going through those typical symptoms, going through some of the physiology, and really understanding that it's, you know, there are lots of people jumping on the menopause bandwagon, and a lot of therapists who I know don't necessarily have experience of menopause saying, right, I'm running programs for menopause, and just saying, let's do some hypnosis weight loss for menopause, but actually understanding the nuances of that can make a massive difference to the people you're working with.
Sounds really interesting and really helpful.
Yeah. And also the existential stuff around it. You know, we start to think about, gosh, have we done everything we wanted to do with our lives? And, you know, you might, you know, if your parents, you might be the next one. If your parents have died, you might be, you know, death may be on your mind, things like that. And those bigger existential questions are floating around in the subconscious at this stage as well. It brings up all that stuff. And so being aware of that, being sensitive to that when you're working with people, especially when it comes to coaching and things like that as well, really help your work become just richer when you're working with these women.
Oh, it sounds brilliant. Really, really interesting. And I'm sure that a lot of people will be wanting to attend your talk and see what you've got to tell us. So thanks ever so much, as I say, for joining us today.